I'm Harlan Emil Gruber. Welcome to Portal to the New Earth. I'm going to share with you an interview I did on June 25th, 2023 with Reuben Langdon for his website, Interviews with Extra Dimensionals. It's 2 hours long, and I share the entire backstory of how I came to create Portal to the New Earth. So sit back and enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday morning for me, afternoon, perhaps, where you are, evening for some of you guys. We have a fun guest today, Harlan. Harlan, did you freeze? Oh,
Yeah,
it
I
did.
did.
Okay.
It did freeze. I hope it, I have that issue. I hope it won't happen too much
Okay. Well, as long as
during
we can hear
today.
you.
And it usually only freezes for about 20 or 30 seconds, and it always comes back. It's not,
Okay.
so if it does freeze again, hold your breath, and it'll be back before you run out of air.
So there you go, Harlan Emil Gruber, ladies and gentlemen. That's it's kind of how I know you. It's perfect introduction. You're freezing, something's happened, and you're over the years. There's never a dull moment with Harlan here. And as I mentioned in the newsletter thing, I first met you at Jeremy's screening of it was the Lazar film, right? That's what we were
Yes,
watching.
definitely.
And before he even got the traction he's gotten now on with Joe Rogan and company. But we were chatting in the corner as we were leaving, and you're like, you gotta, if you interview channelers, you got to meet this person Z, and then that worked out. And then you froze again. Okay, I feel like I'm talking to a mannequin. But can we hear you? Can you test your
Yeah,
sound?
no, it cut out. You said we were chatting in the corner. That's how we met. I remember that moment,
Okay.
though, and we really did connect, and that was great to have that connection. And then, of course, as you mentioned in the newsletter, we followed up over the years with
Yep.
that amazing introduction with my galactic Andromedan commander, Z Earthstar, which we'll definitely be going into a little bit during our conversation today. Just I'd like to even kick it off with Bob Lazar, though, because that was
Right.
such an incredible film, and this whole thing. And I have like a very diverse background and diverse range of interests. And one of my weird interests is in drag racing. And years ago, there was an article in a drag racing magazine about Bob Lazar and his work on retro engineering flying saucer engines. And I have this project where I was getting in my 30s. I was really getting back. I was into drag racing as a kid. I got back into it for various reasons I don't need to go into, but I just got into it in my 30s. But I also started to study spiritual practices and this Native American teachings. And I had all of these parallels in my life start coming up between drag racing and spiritual teachings, especially Native American. And I came up with this whole thing called an art project called the Circle of Burning Fuel that connect these two. And as far and disparate as it seems, in native teachings and spirit in any kind of spiritual teachings, it's about our physical relationship to the earth. The natives talk about relating to the earth, the medicine wheel facing in directions. In drag racing, it's about making these cars go as fast as they can by pushing against the earth. But in my ultimate outcome of this is you have a drag race and the light turns green and they get to the finish line in 0.000 seconds. And when that happens, that's like the eschaton. That's the ultimate outcome of the universe being omni-connected, omnipresent, all at once. So it's these, coming at it from two different angles.
Sure,
And so,
sure.
so Bob Lazar, retro engineering flying saucer engines, which obviously can propel craft very quickly. If you had that in your dragster, you could conceivably get to the finish line in zero. So anyway, I thought, it's a concept I haven't talked about much, but it's something I worked on years ago. And I think it's kind of relevant to where we're going to go today.
Well, what I've, over the years knowing you, Harlan, you have, you're like, your network is so vast. It's like, if I need to get in touch with somebody, give Harlan a call first, because he's going to know. He's probably met them. He's probably had a chat with them. He probably has their phone number. You've really how did you get to know so many people in the community over the years? Is
It's
it because
true.
of Burning Man,
I
or?
am a connector for sure. I
Yeah,
do meet and connect people. I do move around a lot. You know, it's just because I'm always just trying to keep one step ahead of myself. It's an interesting phenomenon that it's just by happenstance, that it's not something I'm thinking about or focusing on. Like, oh, I need to meet a whole lot of people so I could be a connector. It just
sure.
is the way, the nature of how I've lived my life, that is an accurate observation of that. But it's just by the fact that I just have a diverse and interesting way of approaching what I'm doing with my incarnation as a 3D physical being. And I've been on this path pretty much my whole adult life. Even as an adolescent, I was grew up in the early 70s, when the whole hippie psychedelic movement became kind of like a cultural trend, and I was all into psychedelic and flower power stuff. And by the time I was a teenager was the mid to late 70s. And I started to do LSD, and I saw Timothy Leary speak right after reading
Right.
Robert Anton Wilson's book, The Cosmic Trigger, which was his book accounting how he wrote the Illuminatus trilogy, which is a fictional science, novel that he co-wrote. But then he wrote this amazing book in 1977. I read it just as it came out, and I was doing, psychedelics, and he talks a lot about Timothy Leary's research and understanding about the evolution of consciousness from that perspective. And then, shortly thereafter, I started to come across, like channeled Pleiadian information in the early 80s that I resonate very closely with. So essentially, I've been part of this New Age movement and this, consciousness expanding movement, and channeled, Pleiadian and other information my entire adult life, spending 40 years now or plus.
Well, with that said, how have you seen the evolution happen from you being, obviously it's gotten much bigger now, more people, these concepts are reaching, starting to reach the masses. But what is the biggest takeaway from your being in this camp for so long?
That it's going really slow. It's like molasses. And like they said, okay, first of all, I wanted to just mention that first book that I read was so great. Ken Carey's The Starseed Transmissions, which came out early 80s. I never really connected with the raw material, which was out at that same time. And
Okay,
yet
that's right. Yeah.
similar, and it's both Pleiadian. But so then we were supposed to have that harmonic convergence. I was ready for us
Yeah.
to ship then. And then December 21st, 2012, here
Right.
it is 2023, and we're still like, in the midst of the, the
Well, things have
control, the false matrix control paradigm. And
right.
so, and it does seem though that maybe things are gonna shift, and by 2030,
Yeah.
we might actually start to see like and I think they talked about December 21st, 2012 to be
Mhm.
like this immediate shift, like on that day, and I still feel like
Yeah.
that there is this possibility of like this major, like a light switch being turned on shift. I'm not a huge fan of Ismail Perez, but I follow him, and he
Okay.
talks about the solar flash, and it's just
Right.
going to happen. We're all just going to boom one day,
Right.
and yet there's also, based on, like I say, my 40 years of seeing this slowly come about, it might take not just another 40 years, but if it's meant to be, it could be 1,000 years of us
Sure.
stuck in this weird transition of struggling with the control. And ultimately there is no time. That's the one thing that we get caught up in our third dimensional time frame. And that's a big thing that's been coming up a lot.
Mhm.
Even more so in the last month. But like last fall, I did a quantum timeline jumping workshop with Brooklyn Rain, who I love. She's an
Okay.
incredible, ascension healer,
Well,
light,
I like the name.
light
I like the
language.
title of that of the
And she
course. It
spells
sounds cool.
everything wrong. It's Brooklyn spelled with an I, not a Y.
Okay.
And Rain is spelled with does it have the Y in it? Rayne, I think.
Okay.
So anyway, but like, just
What
get
was the
back to
title again?
time,
Repeat that one more
a
time.
quantum timeline jumping workshop.
Quantum
And
timeline
and
jumping
she's
workshop. That
actually
sounds
just
amazing.
now offering it again, the recordings of it. We did it live,
Mhm.
6 sessions, and the recordings are incredible. I would go back to them numerous times where she does these first a talk about it, and then she does a guided meditation. And but I don't, what I want to talk about more is the fact that in recent times, in talking to different people or listening to different people, the whole idea of the fluidity of time, that
Mhm.
we can go back into either our life or into past lives has
Sure.
come up and shift the timelines, change things that happen.
Yeah.
So this is
And
kind of a response to your original question of how I've
yeah,
seen things transitioning over my lifetime,
right.
and understand that time is not exactly as this linear thing that we think of it as.
Well, yeah, let's get into that. It's one of my favorite subjects. How do you understand time, and how are we navigating that concept and idea of time? How has that evolved for you over the years?
Well, I'd have to say I'm really as advanced as I am, and as much as I consider myself some like 12th dimensional Andromedan or something like that, I really for the most part just locked into a very 3D mindset of this, so I do feel just locked into the linear time, and it's just a struggle to be going through day by day by day of linear
Okay.
time. I'm a very mental being, so I understand these concepts of timeline jumping or being able to go back into your past lives and change timelines from a very mental conceptual level. From an
Okay.
experiential level, personally, I'm still like just very normal person 3D, and it's not happening experientially as much as it is that I get the concept of it.
Sure. Yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat. Yeah, I think many of us, Laura's chiming in here. Yeah, we're these concepts mentally we can kind of understand them, but experientially I think that's kind of the work we're doing here with our um moving into the heart, moving more into the heart-centered space, and letting go of the mind mess, like the mind word salad, right? It just
Oh my God,
gets jumbled up in the
I
head.
don't
You're
I
trying to
don't
figure
want to
things out.
interrupt you, but what you just said about the moving out of the mind and into the heart, that's
Mhm.
like that's like the whole story. That's the whole thing, which I'm struggling with very much, being such a mental being. I was told very early on in a psychic reading when I was quite young that I was a mental being for most of my lifetimes, and being incarnated now as a three-dimensional human with emotions and physicality, I'm as a soul, that's something much more new, and to me, that I'm learning, and immature, whatever, in that level, but mentally very adept. So moving into the heart, which has a lot to do with physicality, a lot to do with emotions, and to shift there is such a key. And also, I want to at some point talk about Lisa Renee, who I had the great honor to meet back in 2009 when I brought one of my portal installations. Behind me is the original 1111 diamond portal. Well, in 2009, I had built this other stellated dodecahedron that's now set up at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center. And I was invited to go to this incredible retreat in Utah, where I got to see Lisa Renee speak in person, which is something
Mhm.
she stopped doing right around then. And now she doesn't even accept people into her private community. But the reason why I bring her up is because she taught very clearly that our paradigm that we've been living in, our 3D Earth paradigm, has been locked into just the third dimension, the root, sacral, and solar plexus, which is your third chakra, the power control chakra. And that's where we've been completely locked in. And that's why it's a very much of a control paradigm. The shift that's taking place is analogous to shifting up into the fourth, fifth, and sixth chakras, which is the heart, throat, third eye. And
Mhm.
what's interesting is I was the portals that I had built at that time, I had built 4 different portals. 2 of them were heart chakra based. The next one was throat chakra based, and that stellated dodecahedron was a third eye chakra based one that connected back to the heart. So this whole evolution of consciousness that's taking place, this whole ascension shift, is us breaking free from that lower three, especially those first two, the very dense first chakra, which is all about physicality, second one, which is all sexual energies and things, and third one, power, control, solar plexus, into the heart. So besides the idea of coming from the head down to the heart, we're also working on shifting up from in the chakra systems. And the fact that the very first portal that I built was completely heart chakra based, and that was not something I did consciously. I had designed this shape as based on the golden ratio way back when I was studying design and learning about how golden ratio is this underlying principle that is found throughout all of nature design. Like our finger is, each digit in your finger is golden ratio to the next. Your belly button divides your height. You can see golden ratio throughout a human form, but it's in plants, it's in animals, and pine cones, nautilus shells. Yeah, there's golden ratio. And then the ancients knew this, so they designed their structures. The Parthenon is a perfect golden rectangle. And so I designed this shape all based on golden ratio. That was the only thought I had. And that was in 1984. And in retrospect, I just finally built it in 2004 for Burning Man. And we were talking about time. Burning Man's like a clock. And where you put your stuff, your address is a time. And I placed it at 1111, which I think some people will resonate with. And, I kind of understood that putting it at 1111 was kind of like an activation code. But
when you say put it at 1111, is that
the Burning Man is a clock. And from
I see.
2 o'clock to 10 o'clock is the city. So if you told someone where your camp was, you say, I live over at 430 and what street, like A, B, C, D, they have different names. But from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock is open playa. So if you wanted to tell someone where to find your art piece, you'd be like, oh, it's straight out at 12 o'clock. Oh, it's over at 1.
I see.
Mine was at 1111. But the color green, I chose that not because it's the green of the heart chakra, but because I was thinking first just to make it black like the monolith in 2001. And I thought black is just going to get dusty and hot. And it's not, imagine that if it was just black, it would be like, eh. So I had seen this vision of this green color on one of my few DMT trips that I had done in the 90s. And it just communicated to me just as a color. It didn't have much more meaning than just this color means something. And I made a panel in my studio to get that color out. So while I'm building the portal, I saw this panel of green. I go, oh, I'll just make it green. And then I decided to make the inside, as you could see, like this more maroon Tibetan, but the shape of that cylinder, I did not know until I actually built it, but that cylinder in that shape, when you look at it from an angle, makes a perfect heart shape. And the Heart Math Institute, which was developed from Dan Winter's work of understanding that when your heart rhythms are in golden ratio waves is when you're in a state of coherence and bliss. And to be able to work to get your heart into this golden ratio waves, and that's how the whole universe operates from subatomic to galactic, is in golden ratio vibrations, not just dimensions, but the vibrations. So after building this piece, it became 100% apparent that it was a heart chakra-based activation portal to align you into the heart. And like I say,
was this your first portal that you did for Burning Man?
Yeah. That's what kicked it off. And that's why it's on the cover of my book, which we'll get to talk about. And it's like, it's become my icon or my logo. And like I said, it was 20 years in the making. I actually designed the shape when I was in Parsons School of Design in the mid 80s. I went from 82 to 85 and got a degree in environmental design, not because I wanted to build sculptures, and I actually started to build art furniture, but my main impetus to go to study design was Buckminster Fuller and Paolo Solari. Buckminster Fuller is this incredible thinker that was basically saying that we can do, we can provide for the entire planet in the most highest level of living if we just shifted from weaponry to livingry. And you don't change the model by fighting it, you create new models that make the old models obsolete.
One of my favorite quotes.
Brilliant thinker of how we could live in the most harmonious, sustainable way. And then Paolo Solari has a concept called arcology, which is architecture and ecology. integrated together into three-dimensional megastructure cities. So the city becomes like a living organism. So I outline this idea in my book very clearly in the second half, that there of all these other visionaries and my own personal visions of the way we can build cities radically different than our current paradigm. And you
Sure.
know, I lived in New York City for most of my life. I'm out here in Joshua Tree now, and I lived in Taos, New Mexico after I escaped New York. But New York, you know, we think of it as a very dense urban.
Were you building earthships in Taos?
No, you know,
No?
before I went to Taos, I was super excited about Earthships.
Yeah.
As soon as I got there, some of my friends worked with them, but I got totally turned off on the actuality of Earthships. The concept is great, but the physicality of pounding dirt into tires and the slanted glass and these other aspects of it made the Earthships. And I'm glad they're still doing well, and they're going well in Taos with them. But I didn't resonate with them, and I never dove into that part of it being there.
Okay.
And once I was in Taos, that's when I started going to Burning Man and hanging out with other interesting artists. And it gave me this focus to build the portals. But living in New York, you think of it as a very urban, dense urban environment. The majority of space in New York is given over to streets and cars and parking. And of course, there's huge buildings, but each one is separate. You can't interconnect between them. You have to go down into the street and fight your way through all the cars and parking and this and that to get to it. So the idea is to make, Paolo's concept of arcology is to make a city where you remove all the cars and streets, make it, and of course, some friend of mine are visiting Italy, and they're showing the pictures of those beautiful old Italian towns that were built before cars, where many of the streets are just walking paths. And there's, you see how it's urban, you see the buildings, but beautiful, and there are plants growing in it. I was noticing the details of it. Well, the idea is to make, and I would think in this kind of urban environment, we definitely would allow bicycles and one wheels and scooters and even golf cart, you know, human scale vehicles that can go up to like 18 miles an hour, which is what my bike is limited to, or maybe 28 is what other electric bikes are limited to for the real express lanes, but not cars zipping around like we have in our modern, especially out here in California, where I live, and you go to these other modern California towns that are being built right now, they have 8-lane roads, 4 in each direction. These are not freeways. This is like when you drive through, you know, Santa Clarita, the whole town of Santa Clarita. It's insane the way they think it out. And then everything is just sprawling suburban boxes. And, you know, we know what our current paradigm is. And you drive to the mall. My vision, which I've had my whole life, is just beautifully like the medieval towns of ancient Europe, integrated with our modern way of being able to think and live, not even modern, integrated with this evolution of consciousness that's taking place. It'll be a type of city that's never existed before.
Well,
but it'll be based on
your
the
book,
heart, it'll be based on nature, it'll be based on beauty and sacredness.
Absolutely. And I love, I've loved that about you and your work over the years. And I was surprised when I was at your book release event that you put together about a month ago or so now. And I had brought up the solar punk, and I was surprised that you had not heard of that. Have you done some research since then?
I did right after that. And of course, solar punk is definitely, there's a bit of that at Burning Man for sure.
Yeah.
And it's funny because at Burning Man there's also steampunk. There's this whole retro steampunk.
Yeah,
movement.
steampunk.
But that's more of a retro thing, where solar punk is very future forward thinking. And yet I never really got connected into that, even though it totally relates to my visions of the future cities and stuff. And somehow it's just been on a different wavelength or frequency than where my focus has been. And that's, you know, more and more things are connecting up now too.
Yeah.
And so that was like a good connection that you made for that, for sure.
Yeah, you're like the OG solar punk. Before solar punk was even there, you were kind of already doing that stuff.
And, you know, solar energy and things like that, of course, all of our energy on the earth, as Buckminster Fuller points out, comes from the sun originally, except for atomic energy. And those came from other stars, you know, where we're splitting these atoms. But there's also, and I've been studying this since around 90, 91, I got a book called 0 Point Energy. And all through the 90s, I got other books
Is that
on
the
it.
hunt for 0 Point or
No, it was
no?
a different one. I don't even know if it's still in my library, but I
Okay.
started studying and talking about this underlying concept of physics, that there is, you know, free energy is another way to describe 0 point energy.
Yeah.
And what I've come to learn pretty much is the obstacle to it isn't the technology. There have been dozens of people that have created free energy devices that have been tried, true, tested, proven, running in various places. If they haven't been killed or confiscated or, you know, delegated, you know, by the patents that say you can't make these and crushed,
Sure.
you know, Victor Schauberger is an
Hmm.
example of that. He was an
Hmm.
Austrian, interesting guy from the before World War I, and he worked with water. In the 50s, he developed an implosion technology that would create free energy. He was brought over by these wealthy people in Texas to develop it, and
Mm.
they crushed him, and he
Sure.
went back to Austria and died shortly thereafter. And it's still like a mystery about that, but that's just one of the stories. The reason why we don't have it is the consciousness. It's going
Sure.
to take the consciousness shift of from the control paradigm and of making money. And, you know, the whole world is still just run by that. You got to make your money, you know, and everyone's still chasing that and controlling and businesses. And it's going to just have to come to the point where we realize we're all connected. It's all love.
Yeah.
Once, because if you had free energy right now in the control paradigm, our military is still in full effect. It would be used for nefarious military control purposes.
And it is already.
Right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, luckily not on a too widespread level, because, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
otherwise, yeah, you know,
it's
so,
limited.
but once our consciousness shifts, you know, we don't even need to be solar punk per se, which is why I've never
Right.
like dove into that, and
Right,
solar
right.
energy or wind energy, which, you know, I don't really love seeing giant windmills everywhere.
Right, right, right.
So, you know, we can and we will, and we're imminently on it. Stephen Greer's latest movie, The Lost Century, does focus a lot on that aspect, not just on the disclosure from ETs, but,
Mhm.
but that. And also, I have to say, because you focus a lot on extraterrestrial, extra dimensional,
Mhm.
ET, this and that. And of course, I introduced you to Z. Like,
Mhm.
if I want to contact an extraterrestrial, I'm not going to go out and do a meditation and look for weird lights floating around in the sky or hope that some ship lands and these Pleiadians come out and go, hi, we finally come back. You know,
Right, right, right.
I'll just send Z a text message through Facebook, because she recognizes and fully embodies the fact that she's a seventh dimensional Andromedan geneticist. As I said, I consider her my Andromedan commander. And
Mhm.
the way it's going to happen is through us as humans incarnating into physical form and embodying this higher consciousness, our cosmic consciousness, to bring it here. You know, like if a UFO landed and these beautiful beings in white robes came out, and we are the Galactic Federation, Brotherhood of Light. We are here to free you from the evil satanic cabal. We have free energy devices for you. I'd be like, you know, you guys you can go. You thanks. We got this. You go back to your planet.
Yeah, that
You
would be pretty
know, but
suspicious after everything we've been
yeah,
taught now, through our interactions with, you know, the ETs and in our unique way we're doing it here on the show and stuff. For sure, there's you know, that's the lessons, and that's the thing, you know, sort of with the white flash concept as well, is this idea that you know, the saviors and everything we need is outside of us, and we've been told time and time again that it's inside. So those types of concepts of, you know, ETs landing and giving us the keys to the universe, you know, I think if we've been watching, you know, my show for long enough, I think you've all have gotten enough of the nuggets and information that that's not how it's going to happen. So yes, Harlan, I agree 100%. You're right on track.
and then, you know, and as far as like I wanted to touch on, you know, integrating my galactic self. So like I
Mhm.
said, I've been interested in this kind of information my whole life. I just resonated with it. You know, I'm an odd one, but I never really thought of myself as one of these channeling Pleiadians or this or that. I just was just some guy that liked to read about channel Pleiadian information, and I resonated with it. And when I met Lisa Renee, after seeing her speak, I had a personal reading with her. And she comes on and she says, you know, this is really interesting, our reading, because you're different than all the star seeds that I've been counseling. You're not just like them from these, coming from these other stars. You're coming in from Andromeda, bringing in galactic frequencies. And she went on to say about how I'm still, and this was 2009, I'm still here in 2023, integrating the reading she did back then about integrating my monadic self and truly coming into my power of who I am and what I'm here to do from this galactic perspective. And, you know, there's been, and my whole life, I mentioned at the very beginning of our talk, how I read Cosmic Trigger and saw Timothy Leary speak. I was 19 years old going to Georgia Tech for electrical engineering because I was interested in guitar amplifiers, and I played bass guitar and wanted to make speakers and amps and design my own bass. And that's why what I was studying in college. And this comes along, and I hear all this information from Timothy Leary and this evolution of consciousness. And I dropped out right after seeing him, got in this van, which thanks to the support of my dad, very generous, and they allowed me to do this. And I lived in California back in 1979, and I saw Timothy Leary a few more times, you know, went all around Big Sur, Yosemite, Laguna Beach for several months, and lived and traveled in my van. And I did that again after I graduated from Parsons in 1986. I got an old van. I didn't want to live in New York City my whole life, and I just traveled all over. Part of that question you said, how do I meet so many people and connect so many people? It's the nature of my life to just be moving around and connecting. Sure. And then I did it again in the early 90s. I did 2 trips, one where I brought this crazy Saturn table and photographed it in all of these different locations. I built this Saturn table, not consciously.
I think I've done some time lapse on your Saturn table. Oh, he froze again. Harlan, ladies and gentlemen, Harlan, this is, we'll do some questions here as soon as he unfreezes.
Uh-oh.
There he is. He's back. All right.
Sorry, I broke up for just a few seconds.
Yeah.
Talking about the Saturn table, I think. So then in 93, I did another trip where I traveled to over 20 intentional communities all around the West, because I'm attracted more to the West than the East, the energy of the Turtle Island, the West. So I drove all around. And what was interesting is came from my mom somehow gave me this book, Bringers of the Dawn. Cornerstone of Channel Pleiadian books. That's like, if you had to read one Channel Pleiadian book, it's still relevant right now. On my trip, as I'm driving.
We lost him again. All right. While we wait for him to unfreeze, there he is. Okay, no worries.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, I love the timing of the freeze. Fun times. So as he unfreezes here, we'll get into some of his other work. So he actually has, and I'm
that's crummy.
There he is.
Okay, we're back. Like I said, when it happens, hopefully it doesn't happen so repeatedly.
Do you have satellite internet or what's going on?
You know what it is, and I hate to say it, the best guess I have is that I have my Firefox browser open with like over 20 tabs, and someone said that's probably what's making your computer freeze up, not my internet, because I'm connected by an Ethernet cable to good internet connection.
Okay.
Everyone pray, we stay
Close
connected.
some tabs, Harlan. Come on.
Let me finish up this point. So I started to live between Taos and New York City, driving back and forth twice a year and traveling around a lot. I've come to understand that being this galactic frequency, and by doing these road trips and traveling in my van frequently, I'm like bringing in the galactic frequency that I hold and bringing it into Turtle Island by physically driving around it and doing that. So basically, that's the point I wanted to make. And just that how Lisa Renee awakened me to my galactic self. So like, oh, I get, that's why I'm such a weirdo. That's why I'm building portals. That's why I'm driving around in a van. That's why I'm holding this vision of these future environments. I'm bringing in this Andromeda. I'm not just from another star. I didn't just come in from Pleiades, just nearby. I'm like bringing in the whole, I like to say, people ask me where I'm from. I go, I'm from Andromeda, the next galaxy over. It's a lot less dense than this one. And it's interesting because astronomically, they do say that Andromeda is a bigger galaxy with more stars spread out in a less dense pattern than the Milky Way. But of course, I'm referring to other densities of consciousness, I suppose, here on Earth.
Well, Harlan, you have something unique that that I'm sure influences your work and everything. We mentioned Buckminster Fuller, but you said you had access to all of the archives that maybe some other people don't. What can you go into that?
Wait, I don't quite understand that question.
Well, don't you have access to like all of the Buckminster Fuller library of some
Oh, oh no, and actually though, it's at Stanford University, his archives. Okay. And I have tried to access some online stuff, which is not well done. Physically, Buckminster Fuller kept every piece of paper he did his whole life. And if you go to Stanford, you know, I'm sure I could ask to get permission, but no, just trying to read his books and synergetics is enough to like wrap your head around what he has to offer, you know. And I haven't really been much of a Buckminster Fuller scholar. I've read a good number of his books. Right. I'm very inspired by him, but I could probably do well to study and research more of his information because it is quite dense and elaborate. The book Synergetics is available online, and he wrote 2 volumes of it, and it's all indexed by numbers, and the 2 volumes have been interlaced on the website, so you can read just anytime you want, anywhere, Synergetics online. And then, like I said, I just like to do this research of other people's, you know, try to keep up with everyone else that's doing this kind of work of envisioning future environments, and the ones that I resonate with are the ones I'll gravitate towards. So, and
what have you over the years, have you dove in deep into Edgar Cayce's work at all?
No, that's another good one. And thank you. Oh, you put in the Synergetics, and you know what, I'll just throw it right now in the chat, of course, my website, which you know, has a nice little intro video, which I'd love for people to check. And then from there, you could find the book. My book's available for free as a PDF online. So you can read my whole book, just like you could read Synergetics. And then I have a YouTube channel that I just started a year ago that I need to really keep on it. But I've got a good 24 videos or so in the past year put up.
You've got some good people here you're interviewing too. I see Charles Eisenstein.
Yep.
And did you meet him at one of the Burning Man? I met him at an Afterburn event.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because we've been at Burning Man together. I met him actually in New York City at a talk only once, many years ago, when he was first getting, you know, publicly noticed. And then since then, I just stayed online, and he's such an accessible, friendly guy. And that was so nice of him to do that. Of course, that's one of my most viewed videos because he is so well known. So that was one of the intentions, but you know, we're on the same wavelength. So that was really great to connect with him.
I love how he's stepped into the role of helping out with Robert Kennedy's campaign, which is
I know I've
awesome.
Never been political, and like he said, he hasn't been either. And of course, you know, but I agree too, you know, if you have to be political, how awesome is that, right? And Junior,
I've followed politics, but same, I've never really been motivated to vote for anybody over the years. I think way back I voted for Bernie Sanders the first go around, and then the whole DNC debacle happened, and then I was like, okay, this is all just the fixed game. But you know, with Robert coming into the picture, I've been super like gung-ho about, this is the guy, this is who we, you know, we need to vote for this guy.
But it was kind of like Bernie, where Bernie was the guy. We all loved Bernie, even if he was a little extreme, you know, his socialism. But, you know, true socialism, I believe in true socialism, where, you know, we from the fifth dimensional socialism, right? You know, we're not the third dimensional communism, socialism. So, but it's almost too good to be true. And it's just so hilarious, the Biden Trump thing. It's entertaining. I love Frank Zappa had the best quote. I actually made a meme of it. Politics is the entertainment division of the military industrial complex. And
Yes,
that's all.
that's a great,
That's
that's it.
all. It's there to
Yeah,
entertain you and make
totally.
you think that you
Yeah.
actually have a say or something in it. And when they took JFK out, he was trying to step up to do a lot of the,
Sure.
take back the power, and the CIA and all that is like, no, a president is a puppet, not someone
Well,
that's going to do effective change. You're out.
that's what's exciting about RFK Jr. is because he understands that both his father and his uncle were sort of taken out by that machine, and he was witness over the years. He's been this amazing ecologist, for helping the environment, and all the cases he's won over the years for environmental purposes. He's like the perfect guy, at least in our camp, I think, in who
But
we
I mean, the
represent.
military industrial complex owns and rules our country. Just look at our military budget. It's never even
Sure.
addressed. It's a
Well,
given.
he keeps
You know,
RFK Jr. is addressing it all the time, in his campaign speeches. So
yeah, I know, but
yeah.
that's why how could someone like that get elected? The only person that's going to get I don't, we shouldn't even go down this politics rabbit hole too much, but it is
Well,
worthy of at
I
least mentioning now.
yeah, I think no matter what, obviously, it's a big machine, and there's lots of cogs that are with special interest cogs doing their thing. But the what's so awesome just up until this point. So if we just look at the RFK Jr. Campaign to this point, the amount of education that he's doing for he hasn't had a voice until now because he's been so heavily censored. And now that he's running, the censorship machines sort of have to, by law, give him a voice, even though there's a lot of shenanigans going with that. But just whether you believe that he can win or not, just supporting his campaign is without expectations, right? Just go in there and spreading the word and the good advice. I think especially for people in our camps, right, who've been in this information. He just heard a podcast yesterday, and I'll post here as well. His son, he witnessed his son go down to South America and have an ayahuasca experience and come back, and he's talking about all these benefits of ayahuasca that he hasn't tried himself, but he has seen the positive benefits for his son, with anger issues and things like that. So here we have a
public figure in politics,
public figure talking about all the stuff that what we've been sounding the alarm on the vaccines. We've been sounding the alarm on government, military industrial complex, CIA takeover. And he's addressing all of it, all of the issues, the food takeover, the hostile takeover of our food supplies and processed foods, chemicals, the meat in industry. He's a big proponent in suing big ag in the environmental disasters that come with factory farming and these types of things. So he just, to me, like, he covers all the issues. So
yeah,
I don't want to.
Amazing. No, and it is part of the shift of consciousness taking place. More and more people are waking up, as we're seeing, and there is, this real, even in maybe some of the last people you might expect might start to get it. And he's, him talking about this kind of stuff to those people that you wouldn't expect to be waking up is a big part of it. So yeah, it is really cool. We're really in the middle of it right now. We're in the thick of the chaos and the change, and it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel from where we are right now.
And I think that's part of our lesson here is to move, like you were saying, moving into that heart, that time, that no time experience. We see things linearly, and to be open to a flash or something, like not say that's going to happen, but to be open to some sort of sudden change or out of time linear sense type of events, just to keep those ideas open as a possibility, without expectations. Obviously, I think that's the way to navigate a lot of this.
Yeah, but of course, so many of the people I'm following right now, it's just talking, even like I've heard of switching from ascension to incension. And even the talk that the solar flash is
Yeah.
not so much the sun and global, but it's an internal solar flash from your internal sun, your own heart, awakening you to this. And just to find the peace and just to understand, that the time isn't what it is. All these things we've been discussing, that each one of us waking up to it personally is how this shift takes place. And it's interesting because I focus so much outwardly on building these portals, bringing them to places, doing it outwardly, and I neglect my own personal path. And because of that, I get caught in, like I said, in my own 3D
Yeah, thanks. Let
turmoil.
me get a shift.
Uh-oh.
Looks like, sorry, Mike
Hi, Mike.
Mike's mic is on. I turned him off. It's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, just so that that it's all this the ascension is a very personal thing, and like I say, I neglect my own personal work, and I suffer because of that. I get caught up in my own anxieties all the time, even though I'm so blessed and everything is going so well for me. It's so easy to get caught in, and it's finding that peace in your heart. That's what I listen to, like dozens of people that's what they teach. You just come on, you turn the video on, and they're like, there's no time, there's no self, just find that peace, and and just relax into it. And when we all can do that together, that's how the world will change externally, by us all doing the internal shift, right? And
Yeah, well, with that, let's get into your portals a little bit more, because you have, as you mentioned, the event coming up in on Thursday in Joshua Tree, and I've in the bigger portal. I forget all the different portal names. The bigger one with the that you
arches,
do a lot of
the one with the pyramid and arches, that's
the latest one,
yeah,
right?
that is. And then the one in my backyard, which is the Alcyon portal.
The Alcyon
Yeah,
portal,
I'll briefly go into it. So it's interesting. Like
Yeah.
I said, starting in 2004, I brought these portal installations every single year, unfailing, to Burning Man till 2017. And then I didn't do any portals until last year. So there was a 5-year break. Also, in that arc of 2004 to 2017, 2012 was my peak year, where I did over 20 festivals that year. I ramped up, starting in 2004, I only did Burning Man. Starting 2006, I started to do one festival, and then 2008, and then 10, more and more. And I've been tapering off, mostly because people are not paying me to bring them. There's not a demand for them, but it's been kind of like an arc. So I'm not building, and I'm not going to build. I was working on building a new one similar to the one behind me, but a 5-pointed version for Burning Man this summer. And that completely just fizzled out in the last month and is not happening. And people are like, are you going to Burning Man? Because like I said, after 15 years in a row of doing it, and then going last year, they expect me to be building and bringing it. So I'm really tapering off on building new ones. Also, the last new portal, the one you mentioned, was the Alcyon portal. It's set up in my backyard here, Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree. I host occasional events, which you've come to. We just typically equinox and solstice events, sometimes some other sound bath or other gatherings in between the solstice and equinoxes, but not a whole lot. I've been very fortunate. I'm connected with the Joshua Tree Retreat Center, Institute of Mental Physics, where they have a sculpture garden. And I've set up 2 of my pieces there that are now available to the public, which is strange because normally my pieces are only brought to a festival and set up for 3 days to a week. When I
Right.
even set them up here in my yard in Joshua Tree, I felt this weird uncomfortableness of them having to be here full time. And I still feel a little weird about it because that Alcyon portal just sits out in my backyard empty. I have Tibetan bowls on a recording playing in it, and it's just
Mhm.
playing for the birds and the rabbits. And I don't even go out and do yoga in it. I probably should. But
You
now that
should,
they're at the
yeah.
retreat, now that they're at the retreat center, these two portals, they just kind of are sitting there. The public can go and experience them. So this is my first event since we did that book launch, which was just kind of an informal opening back in April, that I'm
Right.
hosting an evening event where we're going to play some ambient music. It's pretty informal though. It's not like some special like ceremony where you're going to come to the portals.
Right.
Like at Burning Man, the interdimensional space-time portal was actually hosting ceremonies every sunrise and sunset. And those were incredible. Actually, just, I don't want to have to stop and do a share screen, but what I'm going to do is just quickly, since I mentioned it, change my background to show, and I'll get out of the way.
Yeah, yeah.
There we are. Wait, it's
There it
this way.
is.
Here we are at Burning Man at sunrise last year, and that's Maria in white. I collaborated with her to design this piece. She actually channeled the whole shape of these arches, these rings, the step pyramid, and she's there with a little microphone, and there's a speaker in the top of the arch to help amplify her voice, doing a guided formal ceremony that was extremely powerful. And
And it's covered with light language as well, right?
yeah, that light up at night. Yeah, so come and see it. But we're not doing that. Her voice is on, and you can hear it, but it's not like a formal guided meditation. And so, and then here, just since we're playing around with backgrounds,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a very crude. I can't wait to get my AI version of this that will look like an organic three-dimensional seashell coral reef kind of city that's growing in 12 spirals. And that's this idea that I have for one of my virtual, but I'll just go back because I love that. Looks so cool. So like I said, we're just going to
And
host this event,
well,
but I'm
and
not.
but you said you're going to play your frequencies. Tell us about that.
Well, I will bring the quasar wave
The
transducer.
quasar
So
wave.
ever since I started
Quasar wave
doing
transducer.
portals,
It just sounds cool.
as I mentioned, my first original interest was in bass guitar and amplifiers. And I
Mhm.
come from a background of like Jimi Hendrix, Cream, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. Like I was into loud, hard rock. I like
Yeah.
all the other bands, of course, Rolling Stones, they're rock bands, but I was into the really heavy feedback. And so when I was practicing my bass way back, I was getting it to feedback. And I was like, what's the lowest note I can get a bass to feedback? And it wasn't super loud. It was just loud enough to get feedback. And I leaned the bass against the amp and it started to tune the strings to subsonic notes and just the two lowest strings. And it started to make this weird rumbling, purring vibrations. I can imitate it and it's constantly changing. It's not like normal feedback, like where a microphone or even could happen with the bass where it just goes steady state, just goes, it would start to go like, and it would build up and die down in waves, get louder and softer, and just make this weird, like talking vibrations. So that was actually back in 1980 or so, when I had dropped out of college to start a new wave rock band. And when I moved to New York and started going to art school, I developed it as an art project. And I showed it around the East Village and a few places where I'd set up the amplifier and bass, and it would do this crazy feedback thing. I remember one of the last times I did it was in New York City, was Wavy Gravy's 60th birthday party, and Terrence McKenna was there, and it was in this crazy light ship that was docked there, and I had one of the small rooms, and you'd walk into the room and the whole room would be going but most people were like, yes, so it's a weird sound, and it never really took off, and it was nothing. But then when I built the diamond portal, I was like, I'll put the quasar wave transducer, and I came up with that name back when I invented it as a poetic name. I'm really into astronomy, and quasars are the most distant, most powerful objects discovered in the universe. And at first they didn't know what they were. They called them quasi-stellar radio source. That's where the name quasar comes from. We now understand them a little better, that they're extremely distant, very energetic galaxies, but some way, or they're kind of thought as the opposite of a black hole, that they're like a white hole spewing out intense amounts of energies in all spectrums, light, radio, every frequency. So my idea was that this is transducing the emanations of these super powerful, super distant objects. So I put it inside of the diamond portal. And that is a key to it. I remember meeting this other super cool Burning Man artist that he saw my piece and he thought, whatever, it's just some sculpture you can climb and sit in. I'm not going to go check it out. And his friend said, no, you got to go check it out. And he went up to it. And as soon as he put his hands on the ladders, because it's subtle, it's not very loud. The amplifier is not a big blasting feedback. It's just going like brr, brr, vibrating. And people who know my work, they come up and they're like, oh, you're the guy that makes those vibrating sculptures. So anyway, he put his hands on it and he was like, oh. And it truly is like, just to sit in that shape, be cool. But the fact that these vibrations are purring and people would lean against it. So it activates it in several ways. It's also seems to respond to different people. People have told me in their meditations, they can affect it. And I've been there when different people come and go, and it'll completely change its vibrations. Whether it was going to happen by itself or because of those people, hard to determine. But I know people have sat there with it, meditated with it, and they say, I can affect these vibrations through my meditation. And so having the quasar wave in it that's one aspect. It's soothing. It helps get you into a meditative trance. It's like they say cat vibrations are healing vibrations, but also a lot of my pieces besides this are very geometric in nature. And the quasar wave is inferring that these geometries are actually vibrational energy patterns, not just solid static structures, but that they're representing vibrational, three-dimensional cymatic forms. So having the quasar wave do these vibrational patterns, is kind of referring to that. Plus, they may be, they're making three-dimensional vibrational patterns in the air cymatically. So,
well, yeah. So explain that mechanism, the feedback. So they kind of talk to each other in a sense,
yeah,
or they're harmonizing off of each other. So there's an organic aliveness to the sounds.
Absolutely. Like one of my best friends who's known me ever since I, been working with it, calls it alive. And he had an experience in the Diamond Portal where he chanted along with it for hours. And he's like, it's alive. So it's very finicky. It is very simple, and anyone could do it. You can go into a Guitar Center and go take a bass down, go over to one of their amplifiers, set the bass on top of the amplifier, take a little matchbook or something to stop the two highest strings from vibrating. Plug it into the amplifier, tune the strings until they're completely slack and the pickup will make them get pulled to it. Then just tighten the string just enough so that there's enough tension that it won't be attracted to the pickup, but it'll move like this fast, literally like as fast as my hand is moving, somewhere between 5 and 15 hertz. 20 hertz is the lowest note that could be heard. Bass guitars and bass amps typically really only go down to about 30 hertz. So we're talking about in the Schumann resonance, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 brainwave resonances. You cannot hear these notes. But what happens is, and then turn the volume up just until it starts to feed back because it's sitting on the amp, and the amp itself is going to start to vibrate the bass and make the strings feed back. And then adjust the strings, the two different tensions, to get it to go into a random sound rather than what it'll want to naturally do is just to start to vibrate in a steady state and just go like brr, one note. And then once you get it into this, just the right volume setting and the strings tuned to some, which everyone's like, what frequency do you tune it to? I've never measured it. I just have to kind of intuitively do it because you can't measure easily such low frequencies. A microphone is not going to pick it up for sure. An oscilloscope probably could do it. I've never owned or used an oscilloscope to check what the frequencies are. And like I say, it's finicky. Sometimes it works amazing. And it does this incredible, like talking to you, building up and dying down. And other times it'll just go into those steady state buzzer sounds and it's awful. And for the most part, it's somewhere in between those two. It works okay and does its thing where it's just kind of vibrating away, going bum, 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 and just making random noises. So that's it. Super low tech, super analog, super minimal. I've evolved it to make it work a little bit better by removing the strings from sitting directly on the amplifier to getting one of those bass shakers that they make for like home theaters that vibrate your seat. And I connect that directly to the string, so it makes it a little more responsive. I actually, the one I'm going to use is a box. I built an entire speaker cabinet out of 1/4-inch plywood, so it's more like a instrument, and the strings are mounted inside of the speaker cabinet, and that it just works with an amplifier, speaker, and strings all in one box, just feeding back on itself.
Awesome.
That's the whole deal. But I did
Yeah.
meet the physicist Nassim Haramein back in 2009 and showed it to him, and he was like, wow, this is exactly what my research is explaining, how the entire universe operates on feedback. So it's basically representative of a fundamental principle of feedback, of how from subatomic to galactic, but us in between as organic living beings and conscious beings, that there's this nature to feedback that creates reality.
We have the biosphere, right? So I've always, the way I understand it is the harmonics that are sort of bouncing around here on the planet are bouncing off of our biosphere and creating this feedback loop, which we are creating with our thoughts, emotions and actions and what am I missing there? Thoughts, emotions, and belief systems, right? So that's sort of harmonizing and creating this universal construct, human experience. But so when you think about it in that sense, I think all of creation is a sense of feedback loop of
Exactly. No,
of sounds bouncing off of each other. So and that's where this whole idea and concept of coming from within, from the heart, and changing that operating system instead of being reactionary from the outside world. If we just flip that, then we can have more of a direct influence on our external experience, because we are harmonizing these frequencies that are bouncing off the biosphere, coming back into Earth and creating the loop. So anyways, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down on that one. Before we open up to questions from and sort of open dialogue with everybody, I wanted to ask you, Harlan, what is the portal to the new Earth?
Great. And it's interesting though, because we were talking about feedback and I was feeling we were ready for the feedback from everyone here. So, but I want to answer that question as quickly as possible. So, I came up with this first diamond portal and building these portals that were intended to facilitate this evolution of consciousness so that everyone wakes up to everything being sacred and starting to build our environment in a much more harmonious, sacred way. I started hosting an event in Joshua Tree, which is how I ended up out here at this incredible property called Garth's Boulder Gardens. And I met Garth in 2008 when I came through Joshua Tree, and he has a square mile of boulders. And in about 2006, someone had put in an amphitheater for a performance as part of it in the boulders. So in 2014, I thought, I'd love to start to host events where I set my portals up, but also do more sound healing and more teaching, sacred teachings, consciousness teachings to benefit his properties that hopefully we would generate money to help support to host this event there. So it was sitting with Garth saying, hey, I'd like to host the event. And he was good. We did it from 2014 to 2019, but to come up with a name for it, it was in conversation with Garth saying, what should we call this event here? And Garth likes to think of his place of heaven on earth, new earth. And somehow in our conversation, we came up with the, am I back? I'm back.
Yes. You came up with
All
the
right,
name.
well,
What was the name again?
So that's Garth and I collaboratively named the event Portal to the New Earth, and the event no longer exists. But once I started to write my book on all of the work that I'm doing, I already had this brand name for my event, and I really resonate. So that's what Portal to the New Earth, though, is just us, how we get from this earth And it's a way I'm trying to be an avenue. The work that I do is one of the ways that we can go from where we are now to creating and building this new earth that we all want to create. We have to do it. It's in our hands to build the new earth. It's not just going to be given to us, right? We all have to do it together, and we'll all have a hand in it. And it's just, so it's the name of my YouTube channel. It's the name of my book. It was the name of the event. That's it. So now, thank you so much. And so now getting back to the feedback, we'd love to hear feedback from anyone and what the questions or just any comments, right?
Yeah. And if folks want to raise their hands in the meantime, so while we got the portal to the new earth, what in your vision, which you have in your book, some beautiful illustrations, but can you describe your vision of the new earth in a little more detail? We've kind of covered bits of it, but a little bit more. What is the vision?
My personal vision is very organic. This whole high-tech digital thing is like training wheels for us right now. Everything we use our phones and our computers for is all conceptual stuff and so we can go beyond digital and just work organically. I'm very aligned with like Anastasia, Ringing Cedars of Russia, and a very simple back to earth natural way of building. I see our villages being built, integrating water into it, our homes built by hand using natural materials and lots of organic things. And the thing is, when we're on this frequency, I really feel like the organic and natural world isn't just by Darwinian, evolution. There's a lot of conscious design in it. Like I've even come to understand, like in the oceans, like dolphins may have had a large part responsibility for the fact that coral reefs and tropical fish and the way the oceans work is because of consciously working with DNA, with nature, with creating reality. So I see our new earth as a very beautiful, very simple, the lighting will be very pleasant and organic and natural, lots of plants and lots of animals, and just very simple, not a lot of machines, not a lot of digital technology, not a lot. If we do have that, it'll be very minimal. Like in our body, our nervous system works, and it's just there to operate the body, but the rest of it's a very organic analog system. So that's my vision. And I have two visions. One is just going back simply to build villages, very simple little villages that grow organically, two-dimensionally, and then my other visions of the three-dimensional megastructure cities that grow like three-dimensional, very urban, as Paolo Solari says, complexity miniaturization. Just like our computers and cell phones are more complex and more miniaturized, our urban environments. And we like urban environments because that's where culture takes place. All of our music and art and performance and making things and food. And we like to be in a culturally rich environment. And so the three-dimensional complex, but very organically done. That's my personal vision. That's where I want to live, in the most magical, simple, those Ewok Hobbit villages, right? That's
like an Avatar world
happy.
almost, in some of the
all of
concepts
that,
in Avatar.
And,
bioluminescence. Ben has a question. Let me pull you in here, Ben. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted. So I have to unmute. There you go. Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah, hello, Reuben.
How's it going?
Very well. How are you, mate? Harlan, pleasure to meet you, sir. I'm curious if you could tell me some of the experiences that you've witnessed in the portals.
That is a great question, in that I personally do not get the benefit of these portals. But from day one, when I built that one, and every single portal since then, people have come up to me with testimonies and stories of profound life-changing experiences, just most recently, the ones that are set up at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center, several different people have told me how they sit in them and work with them and get these downloads, and that they really are portals, and they're able to have these shifts of consciousness by interacting with the space. This one, the Alcyon portal in my backyard, I have various people that have worked with it and say, no, this is like really a portal, and it really is doing what I intended it to do. And it is kind of ironic and strange that I'm kind of still stuck in my 3D normal state of mind, and I cannot go and sit in my portals and get this, shift of consciousness. But, and the irony is that there is a part of me that already, like someone else pointed out, I am the portals. I'm building these portals as an externalization of who I am and the frequency of what I've come to embody on the earth, to put it out there. And so people, I've known several people, some who I'm still good friends with, that their entire life's path shifted because they experienced the portals. Before the portals, they just were 3D, gotta go to work, this or that. And then one of my examples is this guy from Detroit that went back to Detroit and started the Detroit Evolutionary Laboratory to host yoga classes and urban farming and show Zeitgeist movie and do all of this work because of his experiences of being awakened through interacting in the portals. So that is my intention for them, for people to come, sit in them, experience them, and somehow or another have the effect that it does evolve and shift your consciousness. For me, not so much.
Yeah, it makes great sense. It's like you're the bus driver.
Yeah, I just keep driving that bus and I never go anywhere. I end up back at the bus terminal.
Well, you're already there.
Yeah, well said.
Yes.
Well said.
Thank you.
Well said. Thanks, Ben. I just posted I did a time lapse video of some of Harlan's portals that a lot of the footage ended up being in Z's episode because of that connection there. But you guys can see in this sort of time lapse video. You remember the one I made, Harlan, with Danny Sheehan's voice? Yeah, so that.
I just want to, I'm going to finish off by answering his question.
Yeah.
I just put in the chat, let me hit reply. From my older website, which is just on the portals, it's a collection of testimonials. So your question could be extrapolated to be like asking what other people have experienced in the portal. So here you can read a few things that people have sent me of what, happened to, them by interacting with it. But yeah, thanks. You just put where is that? I want to open that, the video timeline.
It's in the chat there. I just put the
I'll
link.
have to share that. Cool.
Just a handful of them. But so what, what do you think is happening, Harlan, inside the portals? You have all the sacred geometry.
Yeah, I'll answer that, but Ben wanted to follow up, I think. So let him chime in before.
Oh, did you want to follow up, Ben? Sorry.
Yeah, I did have another question actually. What happened to the events at Garth's? Why aren't you doing them anymore?
Well, every single one I only limited to 200 tickets. I got some pretty big name music headliners that were affordable though, because they could charge a lot of money. I never sold more than 120 tickets. It was always out of pocket expense for me. It cost me, a good bit of money each time. And so after 2019 being the last hurrah where I spent extra money on marketing it and got extra headliners and still lost a bunch of money, I had to throw the towel in. I actually, before 2019, I had thrown the towel in and said, okay, that's it. I'm done. I can't afford to do it anymore. I took 2018 off, but then I said, I've been putting so much time and energy and developing this name and people love it. And it was a great experience for the people that came. I said, I'll do it in 2019. It's going to take off this time. And again, it was a great experience and people loved it. It's a very small, intimate event and beautiful event, but it lost money. So thankfully though, it did that because otherwise in 2020, I would have been gearing up to do it in May of 2020. And come March, I would have been like, all that time wasted. And so as much as I, were producing the events. It wasn't exactly my forte, and that's why it ended in 2019.
Okay, what was it? Like a one-night affair, or was it a
No,
camp?
it was the 3 days. It started on Friday in the daytime and went all the way till Monday morning. We went until Sunday night. And we had a lot of sound baths. We had only one night of electronic dance music. I did the first night acoustic music because I knew so many great acoustic musicians I wanted to feature. So I kept it pretty minimal on as a dance, electronic dance party, but a lot of sound baths. And we had some spiritual elders, wisdom keepers and elders doing teachings. And it was so great. Z Earthstar was our featured presenter for 2019. And it was actually, that was the reason why I hosted all those events, was to finally feature her. It was her graduation party, which I didn't know. It's in her book, I Am Starseed. She writes a whole chapter on Portal to the New Earth and about how she gave herself 4 years to master, just like going to college, but on her own, to master her work. And when she was finally a master to come out into the world as a teacher, she was going to have a graduation party. And she said in her mind, I'm going to have my favorite musicians. It's going to be Kalia Scintilla and Yaima. 2 of the 3 headliners that I chose, and the other headliner was chosen by my marketing expert that I hired. I had chosen those 2. And I only met Z in February after the event was already booked. And I said, hey, do you want to come to this event? And she said, sure, I'd love to. And she ended up being the keynote featured person, doing opening ceremony, a presentation on Saturday, and a closing ceremony Sunday. And it was very synchronistic to have her be part of it. And that gave some closure to the fact that I put those 5 events on.
Right, feels like you did some good groundwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ben, you were just at Garth not too long ago, right?
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
that's
Yeah.
nice
So that's cool. You
synchronicity.
could really, and you saw the amphitheater, right?
Yeah, we were there real quick, so I didn't get to see it properly. But yeah, met Garth in his TP.
He's hanging on there at
Yeah,
79
he is.
with a lot of bad health problems. He's actually doing very well considering he goes up and down, and he had a little bad spell recently, but he's pulled out of that.
Yeah, and they're looking after him well. Robert
Yeah.
seems like a solid sender. He's doing a good job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fantastic place.
And I'm thinking of doing another Portal to the New Earth, but not at Garth. They're not really doing events there as much. And I could see possibly doing one at Arco Santi, which is a big inspiration for me, or maybe. So I'm kicking it around for either next year or in 2 years, once we're ready for more events. I'm not dead set on producing it, but since I have a track record and I know a lot of people I could pull together, it may happen at a different venue.
And where is that?
Arco Santi is in the middle of Arizona, halfway between Phoenix and Flagstaff. It's where Paolo Solari started to build his experimental city of the future in 1970. And it didn't get very far along, and they've stopped building it. And it was never really a city, with never more than about 100, 150 people living there at one time, but it still exists as this, like what they would call an urban laboratory. Paolo passed away about 10 years ago. So it's now in this interim phase of just being there somehow. They were hosting an event called Convergence, which I went to a couple of times and presented at one of them. So we'll see, if that comes about or something.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah, Harlan, so you've traveled the world here, or the United States at least, by car, and you've seen all these intentional communities. I'm curious, what is your biggest takeaway from what's the commonality between the intentional communities?
From my personal experience, it's been a long time since I've been visiting any of them. I don't even know of that many right now, although you can go on like the International Community Guide, or there's a few different websites that get to list all these intentional communities. And of course, a lot are now springing up in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
But as far as I see personally, as much as I'm so aligned with this, I don't see a whole lot going on with these eco villages or intentional communities flourishing or happening. I'm not saying that it's not happening.
Right.
It's just that I'm not connected or exposed to it as much as I should be. I just recently got on another web email list for one of these, community connecting things. So I try to keep abreast and know about it, but it doesn't seem, do you, and that's a great question to put out to everyone else who's here on the call. What communities or eco villages do you know of that are happening? I want to start to design and build my own, of course, and move
Right.
to it. But
Right. Yeah. And I've been the one I'm most familiar with because I spent a lot of time there in Georgia, just south of Atlanta, is Serenbe Farms.
isn't it north of Atlanta?
Mm,
It's in it.
it's the one Serenbe. I don't know. Maybe they
Yes,
have a
Serenbe.
new.
I'm very interested in
No.
Serenbe. I've been looking at it closely.
Yeah, I met with the organizer and was talking about trying to do some events there. But the community, I see that one working the more than the other ones. I haven't looked
Well,
at
it's
the other
much
ones in
more of a
too much.
practical real estate development than it
Yeah,
is like an intentional community. But the
exactly.
difference between it and typical real estate development is that they're making these like little urban centers with these
Mhm.
curving streets where
Yes,
normally you would just put in tract homes and a shopping center. They are
right.
making these urban buildings and urban little centers. And a very good analogy for Serenbe that's extremely successful, but it was started in the 80s, and we all know about it because it was used as the set for the Truman Show, is Seaside, Florida. So Seaside, Florida is an incredible example of a successful eco-village intentional community, even though it's not exactly those. It's just a development project, but it's an alternative development project where they just took 80 acres in the middle of nowhere, Florida, back in the 80s, and they designed these little urban downtown center and little walkways with very urban placed houses with picket fences. Now that entire coastline is 100% developed with somewhat similar kind of concepts, but it still is it's more based on conventional development, but it is a step in the right direction towards what are eco villages and types of more urban type of design rather than that suburban sprawl that's more
Right.
conventional once you get outside of cities, of bringing a little town center, a little urban town center into it. So these are great examples. And of course, Serenbe is only a few years old. I don't know, about maybe 5 years, maybe since they started
Yeah,
it.
I went there when they were still kind of getting it going after a couple of years, but all the plots have been sold out. They're all, they can't
Oh, wow.
take on
That's
any
great to
more.
know. So yeah.
But what really worked was, they had the farm, community farm, and they had a couple of restaurants. And so it's kind of like, farm to table type style restaurants. But what I thought what worked was it was totally open. So anybody could go. It wasn't like this closed group thing that
Yes.
this is our special club and you can't come in here. The reason I think it works is because hey, you want to go have a good meal with the family, let's go hang out at Serenbe and then walk the farm while you do it. Here, I'll put some
Yeah. Bring
links in
up,
there.
it's funny, for the past few years that I've known about it, I kept forgetting the name of it and I'd have to like struggle to remember it, but now it's ingrained in
And
me. Such a
they've
great
had
example.
lots of sightings, and I talked to the owner there, and sort of part of the inspiration was probably coming from extraterrestrials at some point.
That's interesting because with the little bit of research I've done for it, it seems very conventionally minded. Like they don't really push a new age or
No,
ET
they
or
don't.
any of
They
that.
want it
It seems
because they
very
don't want.
normal 3D minded, like normal people. Even the
Yeah,
look of their urban streets, very conventional. They're not trying to push some Ewok village, futuristic eco village. They're making it just look like, which is okay. I love
right.
there's something about tradition in just an old town street, our old little streets in
Yeah. And I
architecture.
think the idea was to remain as inclusive as possible and not try to, what's the broadest way to do this, and not everybody's into the ET things. They want to like
Oh,
cut
that's cool. I'm
themselves
glad to
off.
hear that you're connected with it because I really don't know much about it
Yeah,
besides
yeah.
just researching it a little bit.
It's an amazing. It's on some sacred property too. You can feel it when you go in there.
Okay.
But what about, have you looked into the Venus Project, Jacques Fresco, and
Yeah, and
resource-based
it's
economy?
interesting because let's see, you brought up the Serengeti farms, but now I want to see because it doesn't show as much the
Right,
layout
it's not
of
going
this.
into the,
Yeah, no, I clicked on community to
yeah,
see that
maybe
because
it's in,
I
there's a
want to
link
try
in
to
there
see where you
somewhere.
get to see, because they're just showing this big farmhouse in the middle of an open farm.
Sure, they're not going into the whole thing. Maybe because they've stopped doing, but they have their own drama community.
Yeah.
And they even have like they even in Atlanta, and local Atlantan what do you call it, plays and
Yeah,
stuff. They have award-winning plays that they put on from the group, just their own little drama club. And they do their stage, they set it up in the middle of a labyrinth. There's a big labyrinth that you've probably seen in the opening of my shows. Some of those labyrinths and stuff I've taken with drones over
cool.
Serengeti.
Oh,
But
I've clicked on Serengeti real estate, and that starts to show. They mostly try to just
okay,
show conventional homes, but in a
right.
few of the pictures, you start to see that very urban landscape of
Mhm.
3 and 4-story buildings in a very urban neighborhood. So
Yep.
that's what's so cool, because it looks old. It looks like, oh my God, that's been there since the 1900s.
Yeah.
And or earlier, and yet it's brand new. And it's interesting that their website, because I never went to the Serengeti Farm website. In my research, I would just go and
Oh,
look at
okay.
the layout of the streets and what they're building. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's very,
definitely. If anybody's in the South there, go take a field trip. Um, let's see, April and Jay were asking that place in Florida. What's that place again?
Seaside. Yes, Seaside, Florida is
Seaside.
right there in the middle. It's right by Panama City Beach, about 20 miles west of it, between Destin and Panama City Beach. And if you try to look up Seaside, Florida, it's such a small little thing. It doesn't register as a town itself. But it is where they filmed the Truman Show, if people have saw that. And it was this little insular, little like weird community. And when it was originally built in the 80s, you had to drive 10, 20 miles through just woods. There was nothing. It was an undeveloped part of the coast. And now, of course, it's completely developed with very wealthy, very big communities and stuff, every square inch of it. So that's a little different. Whereas now Serengeti is far enough outside of Atlanta that it's
Yeah.
a lot of just open farmland, and it hasn't been hit by that suburban sprawl of putting in tract homes quite yet. There's homes all around it, and they were able to get a big piece of property and make this very interesting little urban kind of environment out in the woods outside.
Yeah,
of
the idea was they wanted everything to be walkable, and it's a nice, just going and exploring and walking around the land there. I lived about 15 minutes from there for a couple of years when I was still in Atlanta, or in transition between my LA life and Big Bear life. I was in Atlanta for a couple of years. So we also have the Venus Project
Yeah,
that.
so Venus Project,
Mhm.
2 thumbs down.
Two thumbs down.
I
Well,
want to
interesting.
like it. Every time I
Okay.
would go back and watch the videos and
Yeah.
research it and look at it, go like, I got to include this in my book. I got to talk about it. Jacques
Right.
Fresco, Venus Project. It's totally the vision I have.
Right.
Not.
Not okay. Let's get into that. What's going on
He's
there?
so 3D. He does not get the shift to the 5D and to the heart and all. The whole Venus project's like a machine, like a 3D machine. And interestingly enough, because I kept going back to it, like I know, like you're like, no, come on, Venus Project.
Yeah.
And so my friend Casey House, who illustrated my book, and we worked together for a year working on the illustrations and all that, he was super excited by the Venus Project. So he actually went and visited the place and spent some time there. And
Was
as
Jock
soon
still
as
alive when you went there?
yeah, I think
Okay.
so. It was years ago. And he went there and he was just like, oh no, this is not it. Like he got
Interesting.
so turned off, and that reinforced my turn off for it.
Okay.
And bless them, it is a positive vision, and it
Yeah.
is out there, and it is well known, and it does mean well. but I cannot advocate for it as much as it does. I'll first advocate for Paolo Solari, who's been my inspiration my whole life, who never got as much recognition as the Venus Project, but it was of similar stature for many, many years, his concept of arcology. And if I'm going to talk about anyone, I'm going to talk about Paolo and arcology, because I see that as, basically the book, Arcology, City in the Image of Man. It's how a city grows as a living organism. I don't see that in anything that the Venus Project or Jacques Fresco's says. He looks at it all as like a machine. He's still in the 3D scientific separate, paradigm, as far as I could tell. I wanted to then, as an offshoot, to see if you know much about The Farm. It's the longest, biggest.
It's in Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. I never went. It's still there. But talking about eco villages, eco communities, alternative intentional communities, The Farm is still going without that much success, affecting the world, but they live there, they own their property, they live there. It is an intentional community of sorts. I don't know much about it.
I had a friend, a stuntman friend, Thayer, who grew up there, and he's very much kind of it's interesting. He has an interesting path because he kind of grew up in this kind of hippie farm type environment. And now he's working on movies like Extraction and, very, very military oriented. and he's an amazing guy, but he's very much, like this military, he teaches firearm safety in the thing. But anyways.
So how about Sirius Community in Massachusetts? I don't know much about it, but
I haven't heard of that one.
Standing one. Yeah, so it's been there for a very long time, and it is based on the higher consciousness, like information. That's why it's called Sirius. They're bringing in the Syrian energy to an eco village or intentional community. I don't know much about it, but I just know that it's been there for at least 30 years or more, something like that. So I thought maybe you or other people might know. It's funny, I see she hasn't raised her hand or wanted to talk, but Laura has been in the chat from the very beginning about how, and here's her latest chat. I lived in Freeport. Oh, she lived nearby Seaside when it was building. I don't know if Laura wants to join the conversation or if any questions or anyone else wants to chime in with any of the things they've been thinking or feeling, because it'd be nice to have like a more synergy. And
I think a lot of this information might be new for a lot of folks. So they're probably just taking it all in. The Farm, I think that's the website for The Farm, perhaps thefarmcommunity.com. I'm a fan of sort of taking in all of these different intentional communities and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't, because I think the concept of there's aspects of these intentional communities that absolutely can be integrated into our current local communities. So I think the conversation should be, how do we integrate these practices of intentional community making within the current communities? Because if we go off and we want to go make our own community, right? It's already been done. So many, Serenbe, The Farm, Diamond what's the one?
Findhorn. I have a friend who's heading
Findhorn,
right now, and
which
then also
I think Sophia has been there.
Maybe Tamara is this one in Portugal that was founded by Dieter Doom, a German person, and it's kind of one of those places that people go to learn about intentional communities. It's open for 6 months out of the year for people to come and live with them in their community, and then they're closed for 6 months where they just are living in their own community. I don't know too much more about it other than that, but I always do like to mention Tamara when we mention some of these, Findhorn or Damanhur. I've been to Damanhur, and Damanhur really rubbed me the wrong way. I read this incredible book on the whole history of it, how they're creating this new community. But when I went there, in actuality, I didn't vibe with it. There was something.
It's got a bit. I hear from a lot of people, it's got a bit of a cult vibe to it. Like you kind of have, like there's they got their thing going there where it's kind of like an exclusive. Like it's open, but it's still got that exclusivity. thing. I think we lost Harlan again. Hey, Donna, what is the path? Is that an intentional community?
Oh, I was frozen, but we have Laura. She's gonna speak.
Laura's
Yeah.
gonna. I had just reached out to before that we jump in with Laura.
That's fine.
Donna
It's
is
all
the.
right. No,
is
it was a series with the guy from Breaking Bad.
Oh,
You know, it was a
okay.
series of like a cult. And that's what I
okay.
always think
Gotcha.
of when
Gotcha.
when people talk about these intentional communities. And you're right, when they're closed, you know, they're open to abuse.
Yeah.
And you know, if the wrong personality takes over, it's very difficult to dislodge them, and they get their acolytes and they get more power, and the path is all about that. It's brilliant. And
Oh, cool.
it's kind of based on an ayahuasca ceremony
Oh, all right.
that this group got into, and then they set up this community. So it had all these good intentions, but it went horribly wrong, you know.
Yeah, that's a common thing here. I'm gonna have a guest. Carrie's gonna come in the next couple of weeks here. She was part of the whole Rhythma
Oh yeah,
Rhythma thing
Costa Rica.
in Costa Rica, and they're serving medicine. And there is some dark stuff going on that not everybody's aware of. You know, even Foster and Kimberly Gamble are promoting Rhythma in their ayahuasca experience, which you know, I know they've had an amazing experience there with that, as many have. But there's also a lot of dark stuff that's going on there that's not being talked about or addressed. So yeah, definitely these intentional communities easily get hijacked. You know, they have good intentions, but they can sort of go south quickly. So thanks for bringing that up. Laura, did you want to hop in?
Yeah. Sorry, I got now all of a sudden my household is up in action here.
Up in action.
Up in action in the background. So like when I lived by Seaside, I had no idea if it was connected to any kind of, you know, metaphysical ideas, which I guess isn't necessarily the point. Octavia, can you wait just a minute, please? And now my granddaughter wants to tell me something, but mine was more of a question of in planned communities. What's the best word for them? Sorry, I've got so much
intentional
going on.
Communities.
Intentional communities.
Yeah.
I think of like people that are rugged and can get in there and farm and contribute in very physical ways. What kind of ways can someone contribute who isn't, you know, necessarily able to get out there and dig ditches?
Well, you know, I love that he brought up Serenbe, because Serenbe is based on a much more practical, down to earth, just normal, like place to live without having to be like, I gotta be a farmer, I have to be part of a community. You know, it's more natural. If you think about it, just the way we all naturally live in community, whether it's whatever town or city we're all living in, there's community, you know? So just to evolve that into ways that make more and more sense, is rather than, you know, just leaving your normal life and going off to some farm, like you say, some eco village intentional community where you have to do all this work, is to set up something more along the lines of Serenbe, where it's all basically set up where everyone can plug in the way that that's just normal community, like you would into any community. It's just more aligned with nature, more aligned with our spirit, and less aligned with the power and control paradigms, you know?
Yeah, agreed. Sophia, you mentioned, I know you've been to Finhorn, but there was another community you had mentioned a while back that you were checking out that's had some good vibes. I don't know if you want to pop in. Hate to put you on the spot.
Yeah, Finhorn, it's interesting. It's an amazing place, and I would definitely say go and visit it, and you can just sort of drive on site and go to the shop and the cafe and walk through the woods and go to the beach and do all of that. And the nature connections there are amazing, but I think in reality, like, they're facing a lot of problems with what their community is, and especially as those, you know, who live there get older. It's also very expensive, you know, to buy in there, to buy a property there. But yeah, unless I remember seeing one of the founders, Dorothy McLean, you know, she had somebody when she was 100 years old. I mean, she might have been 99, I think, at this point, but, you know, helping her through the village, and she couldn't do much at that point or anything really for herself, but she had people looking after her because she was such a prominent, you know, person. But for other people in that community, as they age, and if they need care, it's a real problem. And there's no, I remember speaking to some residents there, and they said, yeah, there's no retirement plan, you know, like what happens in those circumstances. And now, I don't know, whenever I go up to Findhorn and visit and stuff, now the second last time I was up there was a bunch of suits arriving for the G8 summit, and there's a bit of that corporate sort of route going on there. And I know other friends who have been there, still that sort of male predatory behavior thing that can perpetuate there too, and other weird stuff. So yeah, they definitely have their problems, but it was never created as a, you know, intentional community initially. The founders just moved there and started communing with nature spirits and growing giant vegetables, and they were only there because they had nowhere else to go. Yeah, so I don't know, it's a bit of a mess, but
yeah, no, that's what I've been hearing about. And like I say, I have a friend who's just there right now, someone I've connected with through the Buckminster Fuller Institute is visiting there right now, and then it's going to go around Europe. And that's what I was going to say. Do you have experience with, and yeah, so Findhorn, that was a great, what you said about Findhorn is what I've already kind of knew about it. And I think you encapsulated it quite well. It's a very important place, and it's been important for other people interested in communities, but it's not like the end-all example of it. With that said, have you experienced any other communities? And I wanted to touch back on something I brought up very early when I got on, was Anastasia, Ringing Cedars of Russia, because these books that are translated into over 20 languages, millions of copies, espouses this way of creating communities very simply and in line with nature. And I know they're doing it in Russia to an extent, and I know they're doing it in other parts of the world, that there are these Ringing Cedars or Anastasia-based communities. But I don't know too much more about it other than that. So that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Where else? I did go last weekend. I was actually at a sort of a land permaculture sort of festival thing at another very small intentional community, only about 45 minutes from here. Started out as sort of an art community, and that's called COID, like Hills Rural Art Space, but that's got a permanent residency of about 15 people. But they opened it up for the public, really good for permaculture and stuff like that. But then it was funny, speaking to somebody who used to be there, it was the same thing, that there was sounded like some sort of sexual abuse where even somebody fairly young was targeted. So yeah, there's that sort of stuff that definitely, you know, I mean, it happens everywhere, but it does seem these environments are very prone to it. But I don't know, I keep getting called, like you are, Reuben, to this thing about how do you know, create these things in existing communities and infrastructures, and I think an open and not necessarily set around a, you know, a specific, you know, spiritual practice or anything like that. It just has, I think it's, yeah, super important. I was the same with you about Damanhur though. I planned to go and visit there when I was in Italy in 2020, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not feeling it. And I think it's quite expensive to go and visit for the day too. And you're thinking, if this is something you really want to spread with the rest of the world, or, you know, send good things out there, I'm like, why on earth does it cost, I don't know, it's like 90 euros to go and walk through the property? I just think that's absurd. And Findhorn's, I mean, you can visit there for free to go through it, but it's to join stuff there, it's not super cheap.
So Damanhur, the temple, their underground temple, it probably is worth the $90. It's incredible what they built over all those years. But as far as going to and experience this community, it is fraught with issues. When I was there in 2010, there was another guy that's just visiting, wasn't part of the 3-day trip, that lived at Findhorn, and I've remained friends with him. He's a resident of Findhorn, and he had the same, view of both of us were like together on like this place has got some issues. And right afterwards, he sent me some email saying, Google, Dom and her scandals or whatever, and there's just like, or some other thing. It's just a lot of stories. So yeah, but you brought up the idea that a lot of communities are focused around like a spiritual practice, and there's Oroville in India, which is still being built, and I know people who've gone, and it's not really successful, but historically, all of our towns and villages were built around like the church and the square. Right. We did have some kind of spiritual focus that most people agreed upon and brought them together in their towns. And now we don't exactly have that with modern day religion being, and how do we bring that back to building, having a community that has some kind of spiritual focus without it being charged with religion or something, because it is kind of important for your community to come together spiritually. And we are part of this shift of consciousness is awakening to our spiritual nature as spiritual beings, and not just three-dimensional beings that we're locked into in this like false matrix, three-dimensional matrix that you live, you die, just make a bunch of money, go buy like a boat or go skiing or go to a restaurant or a play, spend your money on fancy clothes, and that's it, and no spirituality in it. And it's a touchy subject to bring up in creating communities, to bring the spiritual aspect into it. And yet it's really important. And I don't have any good answers. But
I agree. And it's so funny. And you think that
Yeah.
nature would be a good thing to build it around, right? Like with Findhorn, literally people who are communicating with nature spirits and different
that's
types
why
of—
I said, yeah, that's true. And that's why I said Anastasia, because Anastasia's teachings are completely undogmatic. They're completely not spiritual. They're not religious. But the main focus of Ringing Cedars and Anastasia is nature. Just look to nature. Look at a seed of a plant that you're going to grow, the magic and the spirit of that. Look to just all of nature, all your trees, the sky, the water, the elements. Just keep it simple. Just the 5 elements. If we just connect and understand the essence of water, earth, air, fire, and ether, that's who we are. That's what brings us into form and embodiment, and just try to keep it simple without any dogma, so look, we have someone who's going to chime in. Maybe she's got the answer for us.
Yeah. I agree with you on that nature bit. I'll chime in here in a second, but go ahead, Christine.
Hey, Harlan, thank you for being here. Interesting that you were talking about intentional communities. I live in Vermont, which had a whole bunch of communes and other fun stuff going on in the 60s and the 70s. And where I grew up, there is a place called Prickly Mountain, and it's where a whole bunch of architect students from Yale ended up coming up to, it was just farmland in this area. And they started experimenting with architecture and using different materials. Like a friend of mine, her mom had a house where the entire roof was plexiglass, and you could see right into the house there. But what ended up happening is that you ended up with like this clique of people that were doing their thing. And sure enough, all those aspects of humanity that come up in groups relative to people going outside of their marriages, to one person in particular who sexually abused a 14-year-old daughter of another group there. And it really just devolved into lawsuits and chaos. And I think what we're seeing up here in Vermont is that we have an active community all over the state, which is striving to have Vermont feed itself so that we don't need to get food from anywhere else. And so it's community gardens and growing food that people are connecting around, because we all need that, and we're so lucky here in Vermont. I am so blessed to have access to good food and good water, and that as we break down I mean, when I was growing up, we raised pigs, we raised cattle for beef. And I'm really starting to see that growing our own food is where we're going to start growing our communities. So like Laura was asking how to support those communities. Well, I saw briefly that, was it Sunny Bee salad, whatever the little thing that Reuben just shared, is they have, thank you. They have CSAs.
Yep.
So you can participate in supporting those folks by getting your food from them.
Definitely
so that would be my
growing
suggestion.
food. That's like the thing to bring a community together, like that, without even saying it's being spiritual. Just keep it practical, just keep it realistic. We need to live, we need to eat. Let's grow our own food. Let's not bring in, toxic monoculture things grown far away. We can do that if we integrate it into our community. So that's a great.
Reuben, when you were saying about the other place I went to visit, that was Todmorden, which is a village up in the north of England. And they're the same thing as you're talking about, Christine. Like, they basically decided in, I think, 2016 or something, as the town village, that they were going to grow all their own food. And so they started growing in lots of their public spaces. And I went and stayed with a woman there who's built her own straw house, a really big one. It's amazing. And I was talking to her about it. She said it works well, as they've done it anyway. It works well for educational purposes, so for teaching people how to grow and that sort of stuff. But the actuality of feeding the population hasn't occurred yet anyway.
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine works for the Northeast Organic Farmers Association. And what she does is that she works with local organic partners to partner with the public schools in their areas so that they can start sending good locally grown food to the schools. And then the farmers are coming into the schools and teaching kids how to cook and how to eat these. I mean, they never may have had a fresh radish before. So they're learning how to cook and make meals out of the food. And then the kids are also making vegetable gardens outside. So there's this beautiful circle between the farmers there and organic practices and the children eating the food and growing the food. And that's something very exciting that is going on up here.
And
we've got something like that in my neighborhood. The school is connected to an urban farm that's one of the last farms here in Seattle. One of the actual original farms that started our Pike's Place Market is in our neighborhood, and this school works closely with the children going out there and growing the food and learning how to cook it and all that stuff. It's really cool.
I think that's we're on the right track here. I went to, so I don't know if you guys know Dr. Judy Malkovich, who is in the Plandemic movies. She coincidentally was speaking in Big Bear yesterday, and the community that brought her in was the Big Bear Patriots, which is a heavily Trump-oriented group. I've tried to pop in my head in sometimes, and the Trump Kool-Aid is thick, so I've had to kind of put one foot in and keep my distance. But what the commonality between everybody besides Trump was what I saw the biggest shifts in. And Judy's not much of a Trump person, but they all were very concerned with the negative health effects from the jab and the poisoning of our food and all of the GMOs and all this stuff that people are getting sick from now and having health issues. And it all kind of goes back to the genetically modification of not just our food, but through vaccines, the genetically modification of our our actual DNA. So so there's this commonality of health, and Judy was just straight. She was like, we got to get back to the basics. We got to get to God's food, instead of the mutated stuff that everybody's consuming. And everybody really resonated. You could hear, the amens and the cheers and the, all the good stuff, all the good vibes when we're talking about food and health. And that's why, I had that meeting with my congressman a couple of weeks ago to sort of pitch this idea of community gardening, community first supplying schools or restaurants, local restaurants. Like, how can we get good organic homegrown food into those more public places? And sort of the thread we're going on now, the sort of the lowest hanging fruit, is there's a lot of wealthier older people who don't have the vitality to do the work, the physical work, but they have the resources as far as money and land to invest in greenhouses in their yards. And it's just they don't know how to maintain them, and they can't maintain them. So I'm trying to develop a program where we can actually pay some of the younger local kids a decent wage to tend to the gardens, as long as we can get funds from the wealthier people and the donation of the land. And then those people will get, of course, they're going to get first dibs on all the healthy, good food. But if we can create sort of a CSA type thing within our local community where, we have a diversity of crops, some that come, more from different people and their likings, but with enough sort of planning, we could really grow a lot of food and diversify, around, so people have access to good stuff year round, especially in our environment in the mountains. We're colder environments and stuff like that. But I'm just sharing this as hopefully to spark some inspiration out there for you guys in your local communities. And I think there's a lot we can take from these intentional communities, but at the same time, we've seen as it's brought up, the cult-like things and the abuse of power, and how do we avoid that, and keeping things as open as possible. No secret clubs, no secret passwords to get in, because that's where things get sort of go in the wrong direction.
It seems like it's impossible to get away from conflict in our being humans on Earth. My parents live in a country club that, of course, is just golfing and tennis and the restaurant and the gym and the swimming pool. And there's two organizations that own it. There's the country club itself, and then there's like the whole homeowners thing. And they're constantly suing each other, spending millions of dollars in fighting. And they're constantly doing all these stupid things. And this is just a conventional community. You'd think they'd all want to work together, but no, they're constantly at odds with each other. And of course, it's this interesting layout of like a mile by mile and a half property with the golf course, all that. And every time I go, I picture it shifted to my eco village, where it's all farms and there's all like maker spaces and galleries, and the restaurants that are there are growing the food there, and all the people that tend to the gardens live there, not come 30 miles away from Fort Lauderdale to drive and work there as peons. And it could be all integrated, and I'm constantly trying to think, I'm very visionary. I see like 10 steps down, like the future new Earth. I'm not as much practical, like what it was the first step we could take, but things like Serenbe, I want to start to put together a proposal for Ecoville, for a community development that embodies all of my principles, and yet is realistic and practical, and people can actually be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to move there,
Well, that's sort of what the congressman said. He was like, drop a proposal, get a budget together, put it on my desk and let's see what happens, you know.
Exactly.
A lot of them don't have resources that they can pull directly to fund these things, but when you start getting enough people together and sort of hashing out the ideas, then you know, you never know. Like when I was talking to, you know, the congressman's assistant, Annette, who is one of the head real estates, and she's part of you know, she gets pulled into Washington to have these meetings about the real estate, these groups, I guess, within Congress. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of different groups and things like that. But she was the one that was like, hey, you know, I'll donate my backyard and a piece of property, and I have, you know, an extra 10 grand I can put into a greenhouse. I just can't maintain it. And we're like, okay, well, we'll take care of that logistics on how to maintain it. So when you start communicating with your community, there's all kinds of possibilities that open up for solutions. And how to work, figure out things. And I think right now, because of the capture of our food, you know, FDA has been totally captured, and even our organic labels don't even work so much because they're injecting mRNA spike protein vaccines in poultry and beef and pork and they can still have the organic label. So that's bypassing that, at least here in the States. So it's sort of forcing everybody to go more locally to find out, you know, where's your food sourced? How do I get good, clean food? And the powers that were seem to be helping everybody move along in the evolution so we can be free from these factory farmings and everything. So in a sense, it's all working itself out in a good way, but we do have to be proactive and understand how compromised our food supply really is and take action immediately. And that was sort of Judy Malkovitz's main message yesterday was do not get any injections. They're all compromised. There's chemicals and fetal tissues and different, you know, obviously a lot of them have gotten the mercury out, but there's, you know, aluminum, there's still, you know, you get one compound out and then they replace it with another one that's totally
Graphene.
Graphene, you know, there's just so much nonsense in all those programs. It's best just to stay away from them altogether. And it's all about boosting your own immunity, you know, healthy food, which it's hard to get these days, but as much as you can, and then supplementation in the areas that we can't, that we're having. And especially now that because our immune systems have been so taxed from the pollution, from the jabs, from the processed foods. So we kind of have to do a little extra overtime work to detox these things, to restore our immune systems to a healthier base. And once we get all that stuff out of our systems, once we get to that place, then we can sort of just live like we used to and eat good food and not have to take all the supplements and all the extra stuff. But we have to sort of do cleanup in our own bodies as well as in our environments. And that process could take a few years, you know. Our bodies are a little bit faster. We can sort of do a healthy detox in about a year or so, or less if you're going on more extremes. But the environmental cleanup could take 100 years, you know, for us to get all the stuff out that continues to go in to these things. So antibiotics are a problem when on a mass scale, like factory farming type situations, but you know, antibiotics do have their place for taking them, not all the time, but you know, in emergencies for sure. but yeah, just getting educated on all this stuff. And Harlan, I appreciate your opening the portal, so to say, to these concepts and ideas and your work. It's much appreciated.
No, this has been such a great discussion today. I can't believe we've been on 2 hours, but we've
Yeah.
covered so many great things, and I'm so grateful for everyone else who showed up. I just sent Laura a message since I see she's in Seattle and I'm planning a trip, so we're going to connect
Oh.
and follow up if I make it up that way. I want to do like a little book tour up the West Coast, so I don't know if anyone else on this call is in the Oregon or Washington, or I'm going to try to make it into Vancouver if possible. I've had a connection throughout my life with BC and Vancouver, so we'll see how that goes this coming month.
Well, keep us posted on your travels.
Harlan,
Yes.
this is Laura. What kind of venues would hold such event?
Well, you
Like
know, a
what's-
bookstore or just a venue, like a conference, a place that you can book, you know, and I'll follow up with you outside of this discussion here. So we'll think about it. I'll send you an email. I've already looked at one bookstore there. And a lot of the bookstores are kind of a little bit too big. They book their events and speakers months and months in advance, and it's typically a published author, not a self-published author, such as myself. So it's not that that's impossible, but some of the smaller bookstores.
Oops. All right. We got Harlan. We'll figure out where he's going to be. In the meantime, yeah, let's, definitely as a community here. There he is. He's back. Okay. So we lost
right.
you again.
Oh,
Harlan.
sorry. Oh, well, I was just rambling on about what I'm going to connect with Laura about
Yeah.
trying to find a venue to do it. And Christine, you mentioned Vermont. I have a connection in Vermont with the Sunray Peace Village in Lincoln, Vermont. Have you ever been to Lincoln, or do you know about Lincoln?
Well, I grew up exactly on the other side of the mountain from Lincoln, because there's a road that connects us that is closed in the winter. But yeah, I know Lincoln, and I don't know if Harlan is hearing this.
Right.
So,
He's got that strange face again. There he goes. Okay.
I
Yeah.
lost you. I lost.
There he goes again. Dude, close your tabs.
Exactly. Well, we'll keep tabs on Harlan and his journey, and definitely, I think, he's a wealth of information. Guys, definitely check out his book. It's awesome. And it looks like he's happy there that he unfroze for 2 seconds and then froze again. But yeah, for sure, these are fun conversations, because there's just all the information. There he is. He's moving. I got him. He's back.
Luckily, we did pretty good. Not too many dropouts. So
Not
yeah,
too
hopefully it's
bad.
going to stay again. And yeah, you were answering where you lived in Vermont. I missed your reply.
He was
Oh,
just on
I
the
grew up-
backside of the mountain. Yeah, go ahead.
It was literally on the other side of the mountain.
Right. And so,
Yeah,
it's
like-
interesting because Lincoln, besides having the Sunray Peace Village, Z Earthstar speaks about Lincoln, which is a remote valley that you only go to if you're going to go there. There's no big town or city. And Z talks about it being a Pleiadian stronghold. And Sunray meditation being a Cherokee teaching, they also teach that it was originally brought here to Earth by the Pleiadians. So there
Yeah,
seems to be it's like a Pleiadian portal out there in Vermont.
Yeah, that's exactly where I grew up.
Well, cool. Good to meet you.
Yeah.
That's right. It's a high vibe little special part of Turtle Island for sure, huh?
It is. It's magical, and it's unfortunately unaffordable now, and
Really? So it's just like even though it's rural Vermont, the prices are just sky high there.
Yeah, we had a huge influx of people from Boston and New York who left during the pandemic, and houses were being sold without them even going up for a tour. It was pretty much as soon as it was on the market, it was bought, um, which is awful for a bunch of different reasons. So now the state's actually looking at, communities are looking at limiting Airbnbs and that kind of place because it has gobbled up housing.
That's
And
where I live too, in Joshua Tree. It's completely like that, and the prices went
yeah,
up. It's all Airbnb.
yeah. And the jobs that used to exist in the resorts and in all the inns and hotels and all of that tax benefit has gone away. Um, I really feel that in Vermont it has been a complete just wrecking of our communities and the feel of our homes. And I mean, I know people who don't even live in their own houses because they have to rent them out as Airbnbs. Yeah. Enough said about that. Enough said.
That's unfortunately that's gonna get sorted out as soon as we get the Black Rocks of the world kind of fall apart and all that stuff.
Hopefully, right? But that's an interesting conversation to have with you about it. Even though it seems off topic, it's not, because it's the real world of what we're actually being confronted with. Going to a beautiful place that would be ideal for community, and instead it's being completely destroyed. And the same where I live here in Joshua Tree. It's been taken over by people coming all up from LA during the lockdown. The prices tripled for real estate. Everything's in Airbnb. But thank you, Reuben. You said that's all going to go away once the BlackRock, Vanguard, all those investors, all this stuff is going to shift. We have to hold that vision.
I think, I think what's happening is at the more we reset our values. So food going back to one of those being one of those key issues is that we're more connecting with our food. Therefore, we're more connected to the land, and we're more connected to the value of community. And the reason why it's so easy to sell your house and move somewhere else, sell to the highest bidder, is because there's that disconnect. There's no connection to the community, to the land, to your neighborhood. So yeah, I'll take a big offer from BlackRock or whoever wants to buy my property, because there's that lack of connection. But as we reformulate our connection, as we reconnect to each other, then the value it will be placed more in the community and less in the property, so to say. And then that's when the stronghold that these bigger companies have right now, they're playing the money game. They won't be as effective as in breaking things up as we're dealing with right now. So anyways, that's a whole nother subject. I did just want to finish one last thing here, one last post. Harlan, are you familiar with Michael Smith and the Earth Power Lodges? That he was highlighted in the movie Need to Grow. If you've seen that movie, if you haven't,
you just
definitely
put the link. Is that what you just, the Facebook link for that?
Yeah. So Regenitech is his company. The Earth, definitely go everybody, if you haven't seen it already, go see the movie Need to Grow. And he's up in Montana, and he built the first one, which is called the GPH, Green Powerhouse.
Oh yes, I did see that movie, and then it got burned down.
It got burnt down. He built it again, and then now the tech. I've been in touch with him and his team, and he's building a new one, and it's all open source. They're not going to unfortunately, the other one that they built, because they got grants and things, they had certain patents that they can't sort of open source and put it out to the public. So he's decided to rethink the strategy that goes around. So it's so different that other patents won't be affected. And then he's going to make it completely open source. and it's building this. And this is how I've sort of seen communities being built and cities being built, because it's all around power and energy. So if you have a unit that is producing this massive amount of electricity for the community to thrive, then you build in tiers around these units that are in a sense creating free energy, not in they're closed loop systems in this, because that you put in biomass and it creates biochar, and also this algae that gets infused into the biochar. So you're creating a product that can go out to sell in the open market to help regenerate and regrow damaged soil, which we have, 60% of farmland is unusable these days because of the pesticides and all the crazy farming practices that we've done over the decades have ruined everything. But his product will create a regenerative biochar product that will regenerate the soil. Typically takes 200, 400 years to do. Organically, you can do it within just a few years. So regenerating the earth, powering these communities with energy that is not coming from a central type energy source that we're so used to, our power companies and all these things. So it's happening, and I think we can keep our eye on these different communities and different technologies, and how can we implement and think about how we can implement them in our current communities, and then grow from there. And it's just a matter of doing it and showing people how it can be done. And that's how we change the world, from doing it within, and taking in these awesome modalities that yourself, Harlan, is sharing with your work. And we'll just continue to keep sharing the love and the information, and appreciate everything you're doing.
Yep, thank you. This has been so great. Like I said, I'll follow up with Laura by the email, and everyone I think got my website, but I guess it can't hurt. I'll throw it in one time.
Yeah, totally.
Direct link to the book. So if you just want to click on that, and then you'll be able to click on the PDF of the book and just scroll through the book and just read or look at it anywhere you want. And
it's a beautiful book.
This has been so great, and it's great to meet everyone else who chimed in, and just really appreciate you, Reuben, so much. This one as well or better than I could have hoped, just to be able to express and share. This is when I feel the best, when I have people that I'm hopefully inspiring and sharing what I came here to do, and get us all on this path to, because one day we'll be all just waking up and walking down some beautiful tree-lined path, the earthen path, and birds singing and kids laughing, and no chemtrails in the sky.
Yes.
No noisy garbage truck rumbling up or sirens racing by. And our healthcare system will be all integrated. Just everything and everyone will just going to integrate into some beautiful, the way humans could, just a new earth that is beautiful and sacred as possible.
Well, thank you for holding the vision. Yeah, thanks for holding the vision and for doing your work. And I think the more of us that can hold that vision, the more you share your vision, and the more of us can hold that, then the quicker we can get there. So thank you so much.